Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to my channel. Today we've got a brand new update in No Man's Sky to talk about, and honestly, this one's pretty exciting if you've been flying around in your Corvette or working on your freighters lately. I know a lot of us have been waiting for some polish on those areas, especially since the last couple of patches introduced some really cool mechanics, but also left a few things feeling rough around the edges. So here we are with patch 6.0.4, and I want to take you through absolutely everything in detail, what it fixes, how it changes the way you play, and maybe even how it sets the stage for what could be coming next. This is going to be a long, in-depth breakdown, and I'll be talking to you like we're just hanging out discussing our latest adventures in space, so settle in because we're going to cover everything that Hello Games has slipped into this one. First thing I want to touch on is the Corvette. If you've been experimenting with that system, you probably noticed some weird issues before this patch. One of the more frustrating ones for me personally was how the Corvette name wasn't showing up properly when you renamed it. You'd put in the time to personalize it, make it feel like your flagship, and then the interaction labels just stuck to generic text, which honestly kind of killed the immersion. Now with patch 6.0.4, that's fixed. When you rename your Corvette, you're actually going to see it across your interactions. It's a small touch, but it makes a big difference when you're really building your fleet and treating it like your home in the stars. That's the kind of detail Hello Games always comes back around to eventually, and I think a lot of us appreciate that. Another Corvette fix that had to happen was with teleportation. Some of you probably ran into this. When you teleported from your Corvette over to a frigate, sometimes the collision system bugged out and you'd clip weirdly, or the game just didn't handle the transition properly. It pulled you out of the experience, and in some cases, you could even end up stuck or glitched. With this new patch, they've smoothed that out. Teleporting between those larger ships feels a lot more natural now, and you can focus on what you actually wanted to do instead of worrying about whether the game would mess up. For anyone running missions with frigates regularly, this is going to save you from some of that annoyance. Speaking of things that were broken, remember the visual windows in the Corvette? You'd walk around inside and sometimes the displays just didn't look right. Like the textures weren't loading properly, or the visuals just seemed incomplete. That's now sorted too. It sounds small, but when you're walking through a ship that's supposed to feel massive and high-tech, missing visuals really killed the atmosphere. Now everything is working the way it should, which just makes being inside your Corvette way more satisfying. One of the bigger annoyances for a lot of players was that other people's Corvettes didn't always spawn correctly. You'd be in multiplayer, and your friend's Corvette just wouldn't show up, or it would, but not in a way that made sense. That's been fixed. If you're jumping into sessions with friends, and you'll actually see their ships appear properly, and you don't get those awkward moments where you're like, wait, where's your Corvette? You said it's right here. That alone makes multiplayer smoother and feels like a good quality of life upgrade. There's also been a fix for invisible collisions when flying your Corvette. This one was a big frustration because nothing is worse than piloting this massive ship through space, feeling epic, and then suddenly bumping into something that you can't even see. That's immersion breaking and sometimes dangerous if you're in the middle of a battle or just maneuvering through an asteroid field. The patch cleans this up and now those phantom walls are gone. Flying feels natural and, more importantly, fair. You know what's in front of you, and if you hit something, it's because it's actually there. And if you were someone who liked building onto your Corvette, maybe using workshop parts and customizing the layout, you might have noticed how buggy that was. Some parts just refused to build properly. It left your ship feeling incomplete, like you had all these ideas for how you wanted to design it, but the game wasn't letting you execute. That's fixed now, and I've already seen some players sharing builds that actually work the way they envisioned. For those of us who spend hours tweaking designs and making our ships feel unique, this fix is a blessing. One last Corvette-specific change worth noting is the drifting bug. Sometimes if you were outside your Corvette, it would just drift in strange ways, like the physics system lost track of it. It made zero sense and definitely broke immersion. Now it stays put the way it should. So when you leave your ship behind and go exploring, you're not going to return to find it sliding off into nowhere. That's another issue checked off the list. Now, moving over to freighters, there have been a couple of tweaks here too. The teleporter on the freighter bridge used to be awkward sometimes. You'd try to use it, and it just didn't feel smooth. With 6.0.4, it's more accessible. It works the way you expect, and the whole process of moving around your freighter feels more seamless. Another interesting little tweak is that they've added clearer messaging around the exosuit upgrade terminal. Some players didn't realize you could only use it once in certain ways, and that led to confusion. Now the game actually communicates that better, So you're not left scratching your head wondering if something bugged out or if that's just how it works. One of the bigger general improvements in this patch has to do with lighting. If you've been in abandoned freighters, you probably noticed the lighting looked wrong or inconsistent. That's been fixed, so those environments now look and feel the way they were intended. They've also improved lighting in freighters in general, across space stations and even on different platforms. For Xbox players, there was a weird issue where one of the suns was missing in space, which is kind of hilarious when you think about it, but that's been restored. For PS4 players, the lighting performance has been optimized, which is huge because the system was definitely struggling with some of those effects. Overall, the patch makes the game feel more atmospheric and alive just through better lighting. Performance-wise, this update also packs in some nice optimizations. Physics has been smoothed out, assets load more efficiently, and animations are working more reliably. You might not notice each of these on their own, but together they add up to a game that just runs more smoothly. And there's also a big crash fix. Before this patch, some players experienced crashes after death, which is just brutal. You already lost progress by dying, and then the game kicked you out entirely. That's no longer happening, so you can respawn without the added frustration of rebooting the whole game. When you put all of this together, patch 604 feels like a stabilizer update. It's not adding some flashy brand new feature like a whole expedition or a completely new mechanic, but what it's doing is making the systems we already have more reliable and more enjoyable. Corvettes feel more functional and immersive, freighters are easier to manage, lighting looks better across the board, and performance feels smoother. And honestly, that's exactly what the game needed after some of the bigger content drops we've had recently. Whenever Hello Games introduces new toys, it usually takes a patch or two like this one to really polish them up. And now Corvettes especially feel like they've been given that love. I think it's worth pointing out how Hello Games always works in this cycle. They release something new, people jump in, bugs are discovered, and then a follow-up update like this one comes along to clean up the mess. It's a pattern we've seen for years, and it's part of why the game has lasted so long. Instead of letting systems stay broken or incomplete, they keep coming back to refine them until everything feels like it belongs. If you think back to how freighters worked years ago compared to now, the difference is night and day. And Corvettes are already starting to follow that same trajectory, thanks to patches like this. One more thing I'll say is that lighting improvements don't get enough credit. People tend to focus on new ships, new missions, new mechanics, but the way the game looks, the way it feels when you're inside a dark, abandoned freighter or standing on the bridge of your ship looking out into space, that atmosphere comes from lighting. By fixing the inconsistencies and optimizing it for older systems like the PS4, they're making sure every player gets a better experience, no matter what platform they're on. And that matters because No Man's Sky has always been about immersion, about making you feel like you're in this massive, endless universe. So if you're wondering whether this patch is worth jumping back in for, I'd say yes. Especially if you've been frustrated with your Corvette not behaving properly, or if lighting issues were pulling you out of the experience, this is going to make a noticeable difference. And even if you weren't having problems, these fixes are laying the groundwork for smoother updates in the future. It's about stability, polish, and making sure the game feels as good as it looks.